sure we're almost time. But we need to find note taker. Let's go.
We need a couple of people who can take some notes. So we're after volunteer want to make some notes during the meeting. Just highlight what's happened. What time do you want to do?
About 20 minutes.
You take some, Crystal? Okay.
Can you? We can combine a couple of notes.
Normally people use the online tool so that everybody writes at the same time in the Etherpad.
If you can add something, you can add the Etherpad is how done. People can use simultaneously and put a log, and then if you think something is missing, you can add. Or you can later, you can re-announce the draft meeting, and then if you find something, okay, this is missing, you can send us some correction. That's another way.
I said I was setting off the 40, but so we're projecting it?
Yeah, everything. And you can see this now.
Do you want me to see it, or do you want to? Hello everybody, welcome to the Multipath TCP meeting. Thank you all for coming. Congratulations for finding the meeting room. I know that everybody here is, you're here because you're dedicated and keen and interested, so that's excellent news. Just the normal information about, well, thank you to our note takers, the collaborative effort that's going to be. If you can help with the notes, just go on the Etherpad and you can write in there. Everybody can write at the same time. The normal reminders, please, to say your name at the mic to help people who don't know you, or the note taker, or the people who are remote. And please fill in the blue sheet, which is now started going around this left-hand side, and then the snake up the back again. The usual note well, just to remind me what you say here is covered by the IETF note well. And I should also just introduce ourselves as chairs, which I was remiss to do at the beginning. So I'm Philip Eardley, and sitting next to me is Yoshi Fumi. We're the two chairs for this group. So we have just a brief introduction on the working group status, etc. We have then the updates to our protocol BIS document, which Christoph will lead on, and we'll have some discussion about how we're going to try and complete that. We have a talk from Xavier on multipath TCP in 5G, which is clearly a topic of some importance. And then some potential work items that might be in the next iteration.
Switch this.
No, sorry, I didn't intentionally switch those. We'll stick with the order that's up there.
Okay.
Right, so yes, so we've been working on the BIS for a while now. We are in working group last call on the BIS. In fact, in theory, it's completed, but that's a topic that we will come back to. And yeah, just to remind you that the BIS document is to update the existing RFC. It is on the standards track rather than the experimental track, and that it will obsolete the existing protocol 6824 because of various changes in the protocol, in the handshake, etc., which mean that it is not backwards compatible. We had some work in the charter on multipath TCP proxies. Just as a reminder, that has now shifted to the TCPM working group, where there is a working group item on the 0RTT converter, which is, I think, put it like this, it's a slightly generalized version of the multipath TCP proxy. So that's very good news. Please go to TCPM to contribute to that work that I think's really important. Yes, and we have an enhanced API on our charter. We don't have a working group document on this at the moment, but that will be one of the possible working group items. So we should now switch to the first item on the agenda to about the protocol bits, which is
beforehand. If you have any kind of implementation news, yeah, could you speak up?
Christoph Apple. Last week at the Linux NetDev Network Developers Conference, we, meaning myself, Matt Martineau and Peter Christoph from Intel and Matthew Bachts from Tesseres, presented Mptcp to the Linux networking community, asking for feedback and suggestions on how to proceed with the upstreaming into the official Linux kernel. Feedback was very positive. We got some suggestions, and overall the Linux TCP maintainer is encouraging us to upstream Mptcp and wants to see it in the Linux kernel.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, and I will also give a similar talk than the one we gave at NetDev at the Transport Area Open meeting. I don't know when it is, I think Wednesday or Thursday, and we'll present the lessons that we learned, or the challenges that we are facing with Mptcp upstreaming.
Good.
Thanks, Christoph. I mean, that's very good news because it's proved difficult over a long period to get it in the mainline kernel, and if we can do that, that's really excellent. So thank you to Christoph and the colleagues from Intel and Tesseres who've been working on that.
Any other implementation is not only Linux. We think we have several implementations. So if anyone has information, let us know.
Stephen First, F5 Networks. The big IP in F5 does support Mptcp, I think only on the client side, not on the server side.
Okay.
I'm not sure much.
Could you repeat that? I didn't know what you said.
The big IP supports Mptcp on the client side.
Do you guys also working on proxy stuff?
So by default, the big IP is a full proxy where we will terminate Mptcp on the client side and do TCP on the server side. But we don't do Mptcp on the server side at the moment. Yeah, client-facing side.
Yeah. Thanks so much for good information. Okay, so yeah, let's move on to the 6824 bits, Christoph.
Yeah, I'll present the updates that we made on the RFC 6824 BIS, the version 11, only minor updates, and then also some of the comments that we got for the working group last call from Phil. Next slide. So we updated from version 10 to version 11 after the feedback that we got at the IETF in London. It was basically two pieces. We had some references to experimental drafts and RFCs in our 6824 BIS draft. So we removed the section 3.7 about the Mptcp experimental option, and this can then be rather specified in a separate RFC. And the second item is we moved the references to TCP fast open and how it would interact with Mptcp to the appendix. Also, the reason is because the TFO RFC is currently only an experimental RFC and not a standard struct RFC. So that's why the decision has been made to move those two parts, either remove them or move them to the appendix. Then Phil launched the working group last call for the BIS. There were quite a few minor comments about editorial issues, and then two rather bigger ones. One of the changes that went into the BIS version is that we added an echo flag into the address option. This echo flag allows to basically have a reliable transmission of the address because it can be lost, and so we want to make sure that it actually reaches the other side. And the echo bit basically is a mechanism where when the server or the peer receives the address, it will simply echo the same option back to the client, setting the echo flag to 1. Now, the question that has been raised by Phil during the working group last call was whether an attacker could actually fake this echo bit because the echo bit is not protected by the HMAC, and whether that opens up any kind of attack surfaces. From my personal point of view, I don't think it opens up any new attacks, but that, I guess, needs to be debated and thought through.
Okay, so this is Yoshi from Floor. So this is personal opinion. Yeah, this is interesting point, but ADA is basically announcement. A client has, I have this address, and then it's server to utilize this address. So if the attacker send back to the IP address, but client has no effect, basically. Client doesn't use this address. So I don't know, this could lead to severe security issue. That's what I'm thinking. This, because if attacker try to utilize this information, attacker try to initiate another, join MP join to the address to the server side, but it's also need lots of fake and then stealing lots of token secret key. Otherwise, it won't make it. So, from my point of view, even if this is possible attack, but after that, attack also need to do stealing some keys. Otherwise, it doesn't work. That's my understanding.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Like if the attacker would do this by setting the echo bit here to 1, the client will just assume that the above address has been received by the server, which is okay. If it got lost, okay, he won't be retransmitting it. I don't know if that's a big deal. And the other case is that you, I think, described is if he doesn't set the echo bit, right? Then the client might be fooled into creating a subflow to this address, but then the HMAC verification would fail, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's my opinion. But if there is any people see other points, let's share.
Yeah. I think
Maybe you can move on.
we will go to the next slide.
Yeah,
Or,
I think. And
and we'll-
if you have any question later, please send a comment to the mailing list.
So another scenario that was changed in the BIS version is if you nowadays you want to announce an address and immediately mark it as a backup address, what you could previously do is you send an address with an address ID, X in this case, and you can basically follow this then with an MP prio to downgrade the priority to backup, because the MP prio you can indicate the address ID and say this one should be backup. Now in the V9 version, several versions ago of the BIS draft, we removed the address ID because researchers pointed us to an attack that would be possible, that an on-path attacker could basically mark all other subflows as backup and basically steer all the traffic on his own path. And so to prevent this kind of an attack, we decided to remove the address ID from the MP prio. So now if you want to change the priority of a subflow, you need to send the MP prio on this particular subflow. Now that, however, if we don't have the address ID anymore, you can maybe go to the next slide. Now we can't do this above anymore, right? We can't say anymore, mark this particular address as a backup, right? We can't do what the above line anymore because there's no more address ID. And so the proposal that Phil pointed out to basically revive this particular scenario again is to add the backup bit into the add address option. That way you can basically announce the address and at the same time say, hey, this is a backup address. And that's basically the proposal to add into the BIS version of the draft, right?
Yeah, that's my second. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I propose. Yeah. Otherwise, in order to make backup, you have to establish a connection and send MP prio. That's really cumbersome from my point of view, and then it doesn't hurt security, I think, and that's why I think this. Unless we don't want to support this case, we should have this feature. That's my personal opinion. If there is another people think another way, let's share.
I agree with that opinion. Like, I think it's very useful to have announce the address with the backup bit, because then the receiver can just say, okay, I'm not going to establish a subflow to this address unless I basically lost all my other subflows. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
So does anybody else want to speak to the suggestion either for it or against it? If you've had time to think about this and you have a view and you're in, if you have a view about this proposal, you've had enough time to think about it, maybe you could just put your hand in the air. So I'll just see if we get a feel for if there's enough people here who know about it, apart from the three of us in the front. But does anybody else thought about this enough to have a view about it? Okay, so I think my conclusion from that is that we should put the question to the mailing list and not try and reach a view here.
Okay.
Christoph, before you go, so one of the other questions that came up was about releasing the code, because Christoph has written Linux code for the BIS, an implementation of it, but not been able to release it yet. So I just wondered if you could send any news about that.
I will work on getting the approval to release the code this week, and I will let you know about possible ETAs for that.
That's good news, and thank you for for implementing it and yeah, going through the process, which won't be pain-free. Get it released, and that's obviously important so that people can experiment with it and test it out, to make sure that we've got this right before we actually launch it on the world.
It would be great if you could give us some kind of ballpark estimation.
I can give that at the end of the week, and at what the estimation is.
So are there any more questions about the draft before I put one? Okay, so we've had, oh, okay, cool.
Hi, Xavier Defoy, just a short question. What do you plan to do with the extension? Because it was supposed to be moved somewhere else. Do you plan to still, have the code to add an extension? Because that could be useful for other work.
You mean the experimental options?
Yes.
Yes. As far as I know, the plan is to write an RFC around it, but probably Olivier, who kind of originally proposed this idea, has more context.
Okay. So we'll see with him. We can see with him on the list or something.
I would suggest that, yeah, maybe he's also listening and might respond.
Thank you.
He was listening, but he's disappeared. Any more comments or questions at this point? So we've had a month or so for working group last call, and unfortunately we didn't get comments apart from Yoshi and I. So we really would like some more eyes on this document from people who are potential users or potential implementers, or people who've been involved in the discussion over the last few years on this document. I know we've had an extensive discussion over quite a long period on all the bits that have been added. So that's, it's not as though it's come out of nowhere, this document. It's been reviewed and discussed a lot by the working group. But really to move this, complete the working group last call properly, and so we can send it to the ISG, we really could do with more than just the two chairs reading it. So I'm basically after some volunteers. We're after volunteers to read this and make some comments. You don't, to at least read parts of it. You don't have to take it all on, but to read the bit that you're interested in and say what you've read and that you like it or you don't. And positive comments are good. Just to say, yes, I've read it, I approve it, or I've read this section and it works for me. So people in this room you're obviously very keen. You've made it to an end of a long corridor. So I'm hoping we can get some volunteers. So I really am now after some individuals who are prepared to stick their hand up and agree to review all or some of the documents over the next few weeks.
Even supervisory.
Thank you.
I agree to review the document. I'm Rahul Jadhav from Huawei Technologies. Rahul Jadhav.
Great.
Yeah.
And Xavier, thank you. That's great.
Mia Kulwin. There's also this Mptcp implementers list, right? I'm not sure how many people on that list and how active that is, but maybe we can also try to recruit some people from outside the IETF to just read the document and send a final feedback to the list.
I can do that, yeah.
You didn't forward it as yet.
No, actually not.
Right, okay.
I can do that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, more volunteers are obviously fantastic. But thank you very much to the two of you volunteered. That's really cool. Okay, so we'll work out what to do when we've had the extra reviews and we've heard the news about the code release. We'll work out the next steps for the timescale of pushing this to the ISG. I think the but the time depends on those two factors for when it's the right time to push it to the next step. Thanks, Christoph.
Thanks.
Don't skip out the cycle.
Hi, so this is a presentation on Mptcp operation in 5G on behalf of my co-workers. Revision 0 of the draft was presented in the last meeting, and the feedback included the following, both on the mailing list and in the room. First, there is an interest for Mptcp in 5G, seemingly, but the proposal should be more concrete. And also, the second point was that the DMM is defining session continuity types for IP addresses, and we should take that into account. So between the last, between the last meeting and today, we adapted the section on session continuity, and it is now using the session continuity types as input to the Mptcp scheduler. It is possible also to send the session continuity types over Mptcp signaling so that the remote scheduler can also use this information. Just to clarify with the history, the goal is to session continuity is when you have an IP address which is replaced or complemented with another IP address by the network, for example, when you move. And so you we'll see a little bit of details after that. So on the other side, there was also some progress on dual connectivity, which was the second half of the draft, but no major update of the draft was performed on this side. There will be still a slide on the activity. So just a bit of background on the session continuity types. So they are defined in the DMM draft on demand mobility for IP addresses provided by mobile networks. So they will be used in 5G. There are some liaison statements. And 4 types are defined. So you have fixed, session lasting, non-persistent, and graceful replacement. So a fixed IP address is valid for a long time. A session lasting address is valid over the lifetime of the IP session. And a non-persistent IP address does not enable session continuity nor address reachability, and is typically associated with a break before make between non-persistent IP addresses. And graceful replacement IP addresses are a bit similar, except that they are associated with a make before break. So an application can request an IP address of a certain type using a new socket API call. And router advertisements also may carry session continuity types. That's defined in a different draft. And you have additional background information in the last slide carried over from the last presentation. Yeah. So just now this slide is on the slide on the session continuity type. It describes basically the modification of the draft to adapt to using session continuity type in Mptcp. So in SSC mode 1, which is the 5G mode with a fixed anchor, the initial IP address is a session lasting IP address or fixed IP address, and it can be temporarily complemented by a non-persistent IP address. So just for this case, a session continuity type would not be very useful, except it's maybe useful to make a distinction with the other modes. Now in SSC mode 2, this is a distributed anchor case with break before make. So it's adapted for certain types of applications. the initial non-persistent IP address is replaced with another non-persistent IP address after a short break. The session continuity type, for example, in this case, can indicate to the Mptcp stack that a break before make transition is expected. So that may be useful, that may or may not be useful, really. That may be useful, for example, if the timeout, we want the timeout in this case to be different from the normal or more general break before make support in Mptcp. And then a second usage is the type can also be useful to track and update the backup address, because you get an IP address which you say is a backup, but that IP address disappears and is replaced with another one, for example. Well, that other one replaces the first one, so it should be a backup as well. So, and just to illustrate the type of info that we need, or we think we need the session continuity type on the IP address, the new IP address. The fact also that this IP address is related to an original IP address, which it replaces. And of course, you have the continuity type of the original IP address. So these three information elements are good input, which can basically, which can make it possible to make a decision and execute one of these actions. In SSE mode 3, which is a distributed encore case with a make before break, the initial graceful replacement IP address is replaced with another graceful replacement address, and there is an overlap period. So in this case, knowing the type, the session continuity type, enables making the distinction with SSE mode 1, because otherwise it would look similar, and the application is deciding which SSE mode to use. So it's important for us to learn about it. So, and this type is also enables performing a graceful migration of traffic from the first to the second IP address, and maybe as importantly, it enables releasing the resources on the first IP addresses, so that the network can actually use them for something else. The remote peer can implement this behavior as well if the type is transmitted over Mptcp signaling. And also the type is also useful to track and update the backup address. So, I mean, as a conclusion, so the session continuity type, we think, is a useful input to operate in 5G scenarios, just to basically to track what's happening to these IP addresses, for example, to the cellular IP addresses, which is associated with a session continuity mode. And it enables distinguishing between cases, and also it offers flexibility for future evolution. So now a few words on the other section. So dual connectivity and Mptcp. Some co-authors, so that's basically Kien and his colleagues at NICT, have analyzed the 3GPP specification, with the focus on the issue of Mptcp over dual connectivity. And as a result, they wrote a paper. It's a numerical analysis framework for multipath communications. It models dual connectivity and optimizes a traffic split for latency. And they expect to use that with Mptcp in the future. So there was no major update of this section. We will see in the next and last slide that they have some plans for the future. So this is the last slide. What are the next steps? So about the session connectivity continuity section, we would like to collect and address feedback from the Mptcp working group on the recent change to use the DMM-defined session continuity type. We also sent the notice to the DMM group in case they have some comments. And also we plan to do some experimentation using simulation or emulation because of the lack of availability of 5G system. Now about dual connectivity, about the section on dual connectivity, Our next step is to prototype Mptcp over dual connectivity and to identify impacts on Mptcp and 3GPP standards. So now about working group adoption. So I know it's a bit early, but it's because there will be some discussion on the new charter or possible new work. So maybe it's still a good moment to present this, to say that, you know, we would like to know if the working group is interested in discussing or adopting this work at some point. The topic could be really Mptcp adaptation and optimization for 5G. We think that at least for session continuity and possibly for dual connectivity, some features of 5G, some work may need to be done, and at least it could be a general topic which could be addressed in various ways. So that's it. Thank you.
Any question?
I've got one question. I'm over there, not here. Are there any implications for the Mptcp protocol?
Yes.
Is it purely separate?
I think that there may be. First, locally, the stack, the Mptcp stack, will very likely need to, you know, be aware of this session continuity type and the relationship between an address and its origin IP address, you know, this. But we think that in SSE mode 3, to enable some optimization, to release early the first, you know, to release the resources associated with the first IP address as early as possible, it would be beneficial to send this information over the air, basically to send it over the protocol. For example, that could be a message saying, and it's a bit similar to the backup bit, you know, like, but you know, it could be a separate message or a part of the address, but it's something that has the session continuity type, and if it's a separate message, we need the index to the address. That's why, you know, it could be potentially an extension of some kind when used over 5G. But I would like to say it's for 5G, but the session continuity types are more general. So anywhere where a session continuity solution would be deployed, it may be beneficial really to have this information.
So I think you're saying that, yes, you think maybe there should be, it needs more discussion, but maybe there should be some modification to the BIS document in order to get some optimal behavior for this scenario, which is not just a 5G, but has more wider implications. If I've got that right, maybe you could try and just pull out the summary of the suggestion and why, and put it to the main list as part of the working. I mean, that would be a comment for the working group last call, essentially, that you think there should be a modification for this reason to this bit. Be very specific. If you want to make that suggestion as the working group last call comment.
Sure. Yes. Sorry. I had the impression we're a bit late to make this suggestion. That's why I didn't make it.
You're allowed to make comments in the working group last call. That's the point of it, to make sure have people got you know, comments and mods to make, and then the working group is at its liberty to decide not to take on the suggestion or to decide to adopt
That's a good point. Thanks.
Can I comment very quickly? Mia Kulevin, it sounded a little bit like what you're looking for is mainly interface questions and implementation questions. I'm not sure if there are actually implications for the actual wire protocol.
I think, yeah, no, I think that there may be. The thing is, it's to enable. Okay, it enables optimizing when you are in SSE mode 3. It should enable optimization of the transition, and also it should enable releasing the first resources of the first IP address early. Because just to make one small point, it seems to me the SSE mode 3 was kind of defined for applications like a browser or something like that. So you open a short session, you use the first IP address, then you change to the new IP address. You still keep using for the existing session the first IP address, but when you open a new session, a new IP session, you use a new IP address. And since that's relatively short IP sessions, then you stop using the first IP address and you move on. But here, if you are Mptcp and you want to use all your links as optimally as possible, you will keep using that first IP address as long as you can. And maybe it's not really as the network operator would prefer you to use that IP address because it provided a new one that it wants you to use. So some form of you see, it's not like a major thing. It's not like it won't work if you don't do it, but you won't release the first the resources of the first IP address early enough.
Yeah, but that's a local decision, right? That's a local decision of the endpoint, and you maybe want like network input, but like Mptcp is an end-to-end protocol, so like how to get this input from the network to the client is a completely separate question.
Okay, I may miss some of your points. I'm sorry about this. Maybe I need to think more. But here, my understanding is that both sides would need to know that you are in SSE mode 3, so that you actually stop sending packets on the path using the first IP address. So you need to stop using to stop sending the packets. Otherwise, you need to wait for the network to just bring down the IP address.
I think we would like to see his comments, and then we can think about this is just the implementation or local policy issue, or we need to change spec or not.
Anyway, thank you. And
Chunshan from Huawei Wireless. I also working in the 5G standards. For our from my understanding, the 5G session continuity is working on the IP address, like you say, IP address layer, because you're talking about Mptcp layer. I don't know. When you're doing this work, maybe you introduce some different IP type, different IP address type, but it's okay. But I'm confused that for our session continuity, we only for the IP layer, then for all the TCP layer or UDP layer and what or the other layer or quick layer, all can support. But you're now only talking about Mptcp. My concern is maybe you should propose a proposal in IP some IP related working group, not on the Mptcp part, because for my understanding, if you Mptcp, this working group only says the UE should support Mptcp. This confuses a lot of people.
Yeah, that would be a good idea, but out of this working group scope, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, Mptcp, understanding it's acting a little bit. It's between the application and the IP layer, so it's actually acting as a user of the IP layer. So it will try to use the different IP addresses typically as fully as it can, and that causes. I mean, to me, I mean, I think we identified a possible issue in SSE mode 3 that you keep using all the IP addresses as much as you can, which a normal application like a browser will not do. Because a browser knows, I mean, will be associated with SSE mode 3. So any application which is associated with SSE mode 3 will actually, I mean, SSE mode 3 is designed for a certain type of applications. And Mptcp does not behave like this type of applications.
My understanding is that you propose 3 type or 4 type of applications. I agree this maybe is very helpful for the SE model 1, 2, 3. But my concern is that this type of address should be general for all the transport protocol. Is not related to UDP, QUIC, or TCP or CTP. It's general of IP type. I mean, if you propose from here, it means it's only used by Mptcp type of UE, or it's used by all kind of UE. This is my concern.
Like, it's just a problem with the order. You can start from Mptcp and you can extend to other protocol. That's one way to do this. Yeah, that's my personal comment. So.
The second comment is that now people in the 5G now you're talking about is release 15 5G. Now there's a working in 3PB on the release 16. In the release 16, a lot of people have proposed a lot of solution for the new 5G feature. For the example, for traffic steering between different access technology. For example, you can access Wi-Fi and the 5G. In such case, they can use Mptcp to split the IP flow from different access. In such case, they enhance the radio access and increase the downlink data. Also, people also in the last S2 meeting, people also propose MPTC technology to enhancement the communication because there are 2 paths. So one path is failure, and another path can be survived with the communication. So there's a release 16 study item in the 5G. There's ultra reliability and low latency communication. So people also propose that technology can be used for the URL LC. So I think you can continue this work. I think it's very helpful.
Christoph, Apple. I have one question with the dual connectivity that you mentioned, where basically you have, you mentioned, at least in the draft, I quickly looked, you have 2 cases where they mentioned where one is where you have different IP addresses on the 2 bearers, and the other case is where you have the same IP address on the both bearers, right? So if you have the same IP address on both bearers, you basically, when you're sending, you need to kind of indicate to which bearer the subflow belongs to. The question is, how can the base station know to which bearer the subflow belongs to? Because the base station is not really aware of Mptcp. It would need kind of some signaling, or I don't know.
Well, what I know about this, and it's not like I know a lot about this, but my understanding is at the lower layer, it's really at the layer 2 that between the UE and the base station, that these 2 links are, that basically you have different PDU sessions. You should have different PDU sessions, I think.
Not necessarily. I think if you have the same IP address on both barrels, it's one PDU session on the both barrels.
In this case, it might be transparent. It might be transparent. Normally, it's transparent to the UE. Usually, it's right now.
Sure.
So here, my understanding that Kian and his colleagues, they need to define a way to expose this, as you are saying, to the application layer, and that is not something that is done right now. So
yeah, and it can be exposed on the device side, but the tricky part is then to expose the same thing on the base station side, because when the return traffic is coming back, right, it needs to know over which bearer to send which subflow. So it becomes a little bit more complicated on the downstream link, I think. If there's no specific signaling, or if we want to avoid them to do deep packet inspection and so on.
I mean, it's possible. Actually, I don't know how they plan to do that on the network
Okay.
side. Sorry.
Fair enough. I mean, the dual connectivity could already work just on the upstream path, and it's already benefit. And even if the base station doesn't understand the signaling, it's fine.
Yeah, for the dual connection, it's a layer 2 technology in the 5G system. In such case, only for the one IP address, for the one IP flow, the speed to the packet, IP flow packet to different connection. This is the dual connection. So this layer 2 technology, yeah, just like the previous gentleman said, that the base station does not know any IP flow information. It also is not allowed the base station to know the IP flow information because of a lot of country does not allow the base station need to the packet filter because of legacy issue, law issue. So only the base station only do the layer 2 splitting and combining communication. They do not do the layer 3 or above layer 3 layer splitting and combining communication.
Hello, this is Yoshi from Floor. Yeah, it's interesting. So you said you have 3 SSC mode, and then in my understanding, SSC mode is determined inside 5G network. Am I correct?
Yes, I believe it's
Okay.
associated with every application by policy.
So Mptcp application can only know, okay, I'm in SSC mode or SSC mode 2. That means if Mptcp application has started, and then by using some special API, it can know the current SSC mode. And if it said your SSC mode 1, then there is not so many things to do for this Mptcp application.
Yeah, but it's only for one IP address. So basically, if you're using SSC mode 1 and you have Wi-Fi also, it's basically like 4G. But it's just only if the application is associated with SSC mode 2 or 3 that basically you gain something, because you have shorter path. But you have to work more for it. So
So my true question is there any way from Mptcp application can choose, I want to have SSC mode 2 or SSC mode 3. Is there any way to do this?
I think that could be an interesting, it could be interesting to think about that. Right now, I believe it's associated with the application. If the application is making use of Mptcp, maybe there is something there to investigate. Yeah.
And just clarification question. You can have multiple PDU in a single host, on one host. Let's say if I have 2 Mptcp application, and then I can have a 2 PDU session for each Mptcp application. It is possible?
Can I answer your question? Yeah, in the 5G, they have defined the policy for the network send out to the UE, says that this application you can use SSC mode 1, this application use SSC mode 2, this application SSC mode 3. But that does say this application does not say Mptcp application. It does say application, not say Mptcp application.
Okay. Yeah, anyway. Yeah.
Yep.
It's promising, but I would see more concrete, exchange between MPTCP layer and how, we can utilize the SSC mode.
Yeah. Sure. I think I will need to understand after we can discuss more about your question on the list or directly by email. Thank you.
You want to know future items that way. Oh, okay. This one? Oh, that's the last topic. Yeah, that's the next topic. Okay, so this is the last topic of the discussion. Previously, I sent a message to the mailing list, but right now we are about to finish 6.8.24 base draft. And then after we finish this draft, we don't have working group item right now. And then right now, yeah, I see lots of people in this room, but compared to the, for 1 year ago, 2 years ago, we are losing some energy in the working group. And one might say, we can skip several meetings, or in the worst case, let's say close the meeting. But I see still some energy in the working group. So, I would like to figure it out what we can do in short term and long term. And then previously we see lots of interesting presentation in the previous meeting. So I tried to summarize some of the nice proposal on our working group meeting on the mailing list as well. And so I have listed several topics here. For example, APIs. We have several presentations about APIs. And then also about some feature extension, we can have some security feature experiment by using TLS, or we see some proposal. And then these days, TCP Inc. has been deployed. And previously, originally, when STP Inc. working group has been established, one of the applications for STP Inc. working group is to support MPTCP. So maybe we can go back to this status, and then maybe TCP Inc. and MPTCP collaborate each other, and then maybe we can think about some method. And then another thing is happy high performance environment. And then there are several approaches like a happy eyeball, sending MPTCP initialization message to multiple destination at the same time, and so that we can enhance the performance. That's one way. And also we can think about packet scheduling. Our core spec does not talk about packet scheduling, and right now it's left to the implementation. But if someone come up with very nice packet scheduling mechanism, it might be better to standardize it. That's another possible idea. And then there are some suggestions that we should interact with working group more. And DMM is one of the good example. We might be find a nice way to utilize MPTCP on 5G network. Maybe promising idea. And VLOC ops, there's some segmented routing proposals. Maybe they might utilize MPTCP. And routing working group, we can utilize some multipath information, and then we might be able to utilize MPTCP here and there may be several ways to collaborate each other. But I would like to see, what we can do, especially in short term, and then also we can see something in long term. Then if you can have some opinions, and please share, and then we can think about future plan with the working group more clearly. Any opinions? Oh, yes. Huh?
Excuse me. So Zheng Cao, so is there any timeline for the rechartering?
There is no timeline, but right now we don't have any working group item. And then if we don't have a working group item, there is no strong reason to have a meeting, probably. So we might skip 1 or 2 meetings until possible promising working group item has proposed. Yeah, we need to think about it. If there is very promising idea, and then there are lots of many people start feeling this is a good idea to discuss, and then we can have a meeting. But if we don't see a good short-term item, maybe we can skip several meetings. But I would like to figure out what's the atmosphere in this group. That's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Yeah. Okay. So I would understand this better. Are you going to have this? Is this the proposal you solicited already on the mailing list, right?
Right.
It's already discussion. So are you asking us, the plan, that if this is okay to write this into the charter, or
No.
I don't know?
No, I mean, that's a good question. So this was a collection of ideas that people have raised about topics that people might be interested in working on. So in order for it to become a working group item, it basically needs a community of interest. So it needs more than one person to say, I'm interested in this topic. So you need several people to work on it. Or at least, you need people to work on it, but you also need people who say, if somebody does work on it, I would use this. So it needs a community of people rather than just being one individual who's interested in the topic and will be the only person who would use it. So that's basically the selection criteria. So there has to be a group of people who want the work, want the output, and are prepared to work on it. They don't have to be completely overlap. It doesn't have to be exactly the same people in each set, but yeah.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay, that sounds more clear. So in general, still, if someone wants to push some items forward, just submit more drafts and have more discussion on this. Is that?
It doesn't even need drafts at this stage. It needs you to say.
Some discussion.
It needs you to say, as a user, I would, if the working group produced something on security enhancement using TLS, I would want to use this.
Okay.
I haven't got time to work on it, or I haven't got the expertise to work on it, but as a user, I would want it.
That's very, that's useful.
So it's that sort of thing on the mailing list would be great.
Okay. Thank you for the guide.
You want to say something, Miriam?
You want me to say something?
You were in the right previously.
Mia Kulevin, responsible AD. So if this working group has reached the end of the charter, then what we usually do is close the working group, right? I'm not saying that you cannot recharter and figure out new work items, but if there's nothing to work on, the working group will be closed. That does not mean that you cannot work on Mptcp anymore. I think before closing the working group, I would like to talk to the TCPM working group and see if they can recharter and explicitly include any maintenance work on Mptcp in their charter. Because then you also have you have one working group where the whole TCP community can actually talk, which I think would be very valuable. Yeah, and even if we close the working group, we can still leave the mailing list open so you can have further discussions there.
The counter question is what we can do if we want to continue the working group.
You need work.
So I think you've heard what the default
No,
thing that will
yeah.
happen is.
But I mean, even if we integrate it into TCPM, if a lot of new work shows up, there's also a way to whatever TCPM could get 2 sessions per IETF and have one more focused on Mptcp and one more focused on other TCP questions. I mean, that's kind of what we do with the transport area working group. Transport working group, for example, that they very often have one session that's focused on SCTP, for example, right? So as I said, just closing the working group doesn't mean the work has to end, but if there's not enough work in this room with interest for these people, then closing the working group is the natural thing to do.
But do we have some kind of deadline to make such kind of decision?
Yes.
Oh.
As soon as the last item on your list is kind of through the process, we have to make a decision.
Okay. So if you want to continue the working group, please work hard. That's the message from AD.
We've reached the end. How are the blue sheets doing? Who has not signed the blue sheet? Oh dear. Where is it? Can we get it to somebody? Oh, cool.
Christoph, Apple. I think what's probably going on at the moment is people are busy deploying it and finishing up use cases that already have been identified in the past and pushing to get Mptcp out there in the implementations and so on. So that's maybe why the activity in the working group has calmed down a little bit, and also feel sometimes the MTCP working group is highly location dependent on where the meeting is more or less activity, because the people who are working on MTCP are mostly centered in the European location. And
Right.
So personally, I think it would be okay to wait a bit and see where it goes, because people are busy deploying it, and there's a lot of activity going on in Mptcp, even if it's not visible at the IETF. There are billions of devices out there that are using it every day, and there are more coming.
Right. By the way, Christoph, while you are working on implementation, you are seeing some need to work on API? What about API for Linux implementation?
iOS API, definitely not, because we control our API and we don't Personally, I always think that the IETF is not the right place for API standardization because it's more the implementations, but that's just my personal opinion. I know others have other opinion. We are definitely looking in the Linux upstreaming work into how we can expose Mptcp to the user space. Whether that would be useful to standardize that, I don't know.
I see.
Quick question. So you say people deploy Mptcp, it's great, and if they have smaller changes, comments, needs, there will be a place in the IETF to work on this. Do you expect any kind of larger request changes coming out of that?
Maybe. Sorry. I don't think there are going to be, well, it kind of depends. Personally, I have a long list of things that I would like to change, but that's not going to happen because we need to talk to servers. So I don't think there's going to, personally, I don't think there are going to be lots of huge changes, at least not in the foreseeable future. Long term, I would like to well, I know I have a list of things that are wrong, but that's a different story.
So like my main concern with that group is that a lot of TCP experts don't show up in this group anymore. And we have seen this with the proxy discussion, that those people suddenly then show up again and have different opinions and so on. So I think it would be valuable for any kind of Mptcp extensions to go into the TCP working group. Again, I don't want to stop anybody from working on this protocol because it's a good protocol. It's really nice to see that it's taking off. So.
Anybody left who hasn't signed? I think we're done.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for those reviews coming in. All very welcome.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Right. And as I said, no, we are not, right now we are not clear vision to have a meeting at Bangkok. And if you really want to show something, you should please notify us beforehand.